This next section of the Project Inspector recertification will cover the structural safety. For part 1, we'll be just going through an overview of the technical changes to the codes, and this will be rather brief because later on we will go through these in much more detail. Most of the 2016 CBC amendments continued in the 2019 version. Some of those were either adopted into the model code or the reference standards, and those were therefore repealed, and that was a change. So it's important to keep in mind that though those amendments were removed, the requirements still remain, just now they are found in the model code or the reference standards. It's also worth noting that all previous chapter-specific definitions, which usually were in section 02 for a given chapter, have been relocated to chapter 2 of the overall building code. This model code-driven change generally is not going to be identified for the remaining presentation unless there are other related substantive changes that the inspector should be aware of. Therefore, it's recommended that project inspectors skim through Chapter 2 for margin markings to identify changes both from the model code as well as CBC amendments compared to the previous edition. Regarding the new structural material standards that have been adopted by the 2019 CBC, this is a brief look at all of the different reference standards that are indicated, and we'll be going through each of these in further detail. It's important that the inspector needs access to these standards either by purchase or demonstrating access to the online content. With respect to Chapter 18 for soils and foundation, for the 2019 CBC, it generally adopts the 2018 IBC Chapter 18, and there's no significant changes to CBC Chapter 18A. It's mostly language improvements. However, we will talk about more of this later on. For concrete, we clarified requirements for holding wires used in reinforcing cages. With respect to shotcrete, we repealed many previous amendments that were made during the 2016 intervening code cycle, since many of those are new amendments have been co-adopted with OSHPODs. We also updated the reference ACI 506R to the 2016 version, which is the guide to shotcrete. This guide to shotcrete is supposed to serve as a commentary for the ACI 506.213, which is a specification for shotcrete. For masonry, there are some updated masonry reference standards now. The building code requirements are in TMS 402-16, updated from the 2013. The specification for masonry structures is still TMS 602, but now it's the 2016 edition, compared to the 2013 previously. Both of these standards are in one publication, and it also includes commentary for both of these. If you'd like to see a summary of the changes, you can refer to the link provided. Continuing on with some of the masonry changes, overall the TMS was reorganized and reformatted with respect to the masonry testing and special inspection requirements. DSA clarified the T&I requirements for non-structural masonry for the non-structural masonry wall IR, and now the CBC explicitly references the TMS for the prism testing method as well as the unit strength tests for masonry. The CBC amendments incorporate some of the DSA masonry R requirements, such as the alternative testing requirements for unidentified rebar to match that would be applicable for concrete reinforcing. And there's also a maximum horizontal reinforcing spacing that has been increased for certain wall types, but these are ones that, for those of you who are inspectors with DSA for a while, should be familiar with. There's also now an allowance for a higher low lift grout height for wider CMU. Again, we'll cover these in more detail later on. Regarding steel, there are now updated structural steel standards. AISC 316 now has a 2016 version, which is the specification for structural steel buildings. You can find a summary of the changes on AISC on AISC's website at the two links that are noted below. There's also updated structural steel standards for the seismic provisions. That's AISC 341, the 2016 version, as well as the AISC 358 2016 version for the pre-qualified connections for special and intermediate steel moment frames or for seismic applications. Continuing on with the updated structural steel standards, there's also a new one for AISC 303 2016 compared to the 2010 version, and that's the Code of Standard Practice for steel buildings and bridges. You can find a summary of the changes, which generally just repeats the preface information and the link provided. There's also now a 2014 compared to 2009 version of the specification for structural joints using high-strength bolts, and that's been often referred to as the RCSC because that's put out by the Research Council for Structural Connections. A summary of changes is provided in the link there. These standards are also contained in the manuals previously pictured above and can be downloaded from AISC's website. We repealed the 2016 amendment in section 2205A31 and that modified section A4 for the protected zone identification. And the reason that we repealed that is because the AISC 303 2016 edition, section 1.11, now adequately provides requirements for protected zones, such that the particulars associated with the locations, extent, and maintenance to protect those from prohibited attachments. These are often still going to be seen as they have been seen in the past, usually associated with portions with the particular connections or elements or parts of the seismic force resisting system, usually in moment resisting frames, both special and intermediate, as well as special truss moment frames, buckling restrained brace frames, special concentric brace frames, eccentric braced frames, and special plate shear walls. There have been some updates to the structural steel welding standards. For the AWSD 1.1, there's now the 2015 edition for the structural welding code for steel. Similarly, for the remaining ones here, there's the AWSD 1.4, a 2017 edition for the structural welding code for reinforcing steel, and AWSD 1.8, the 2016 edition, the structural welding code for the seismic supplement. And now there is the QC1 2016, which is the specification for AWS certification of welding inspectors. For steel joist standards, there's now new combined and updated steel joist standards. The SJI, Steel Joist Institute 100-15, that's the 44th edition now of the standard specification load table and weight tables for steel joists and joist girders series, K series, LH series, DHL series, and joist girders. The previous standards were SJI, K, LH, DLH were merged into the S100. For the SJI 200-15, that's the standard specification for composite steel joists, CJ series. This has just been renamed, though there has been updates also. The previous name was SJI CJ, and it's been renamed to the S200. These standards can be downloaded for free from the SJI at the link provided. If you happen to have these on your project, be sure that the Laboratory of Record and Welding Special Inspector are aware of these new standards. For cold formed steel standards, these have been updated and some of them are new, though often they have combined previous standards. So the AISI S100, there's now a 2016 edition. That's the North American specification for the design of cold formed steel structural members. It's been reorganized to match that organization found in AISC 360, which we covered in an earlier slide. It has also been updated. Thankfully, in this new edition, it includes a section number comparison table between the 2012 and 2016 versions. There's now the AISI S202-15, that's the 2015 edition for the Code of Standard Practice for Cold Formed Steel Framing. There's also the AISI S240 2015 edition, which is the North American standard for cold-formed steel structural framing. Previous standards S200 and S211 through S214 were merged into this single document now, the S240. This S240 now also includes quality control and quality assurance requirements. Continuing on with the cold-formed steel, the AISI S400-15/S1-2016, that's the North American standard for seismic design of cold-formed steel structural systems for that's the 2015 edition, with the supplement 1 dated 2016. Previous standards were the S110 and the S213 were merged into this single S400 document now. The AISI S220 has been updated to the 2015 edition. That's the North American standard for cold-formed steel framing, non-structural members. It's worth noting that the AISI 240 and 400 are similar in their relationship to that seen between AISE 360 and 341. These standards may be downloaded for free from the Cold-Formed Steel Engineers Institute at the link provided. Moving on to wood now, there are some new wood standards. The National Design Specification, there's a 2018 edition now. Often this is just abbreviated as NDS. Some of the significant changes are that there were fastener changes due to higher roof wind loads that were required in the new ASC 716. A summary of changes are available at the links noted below. The first web link provides access to AWC training information, which covers changes affecting wood in the 2018 IBC, ASC 716, as well as the 2018 NDS. PDFs of the presentations, YouTube videos, and online class options are available. However, it's important to note that most changes would be of interest to design professionals rather than project inspectors. Continuing on with changes to the wood, there's also updated standard the ANSI 117-2015 edition. That's the standard specification for structural glued laminated timber of soft wood species. There's also the ANSI 190.1 2017 edition. That's new for the structural, which covers structural glued laminated timber. It's important to note that we repealed the emergency CBC amendments that addressed the 2015 Berkeley balcony collapse because the model code now includes that language. For more information related to wood-related code changes in both the 2018 IBC and IEBC, that's the International Existing Building Code, you can refer to the link below. It's important to note, though, that the presentations do not consider the more restrictive DSA amendments.